Hello everyone, this is Caroline, and today I want to share my cards that I created with the Love from Lizi card kit for the month of January 2020, and the name of the kit is Hey Sweetie. So let's jump right into card number one. For card number one, I used one of the stickers, the cupcake stickers, and I decided to create a background with the embossing folder that came with the kit. I'm using 4 different inks, 4 different colors from my distress inks. I'm using a pink, yellow, like a turquoise blue, and like yellow green. I am adding this to my embossing folder to the side that has the markups, and then I'm adding some water and my piece of white cardstock and run this through my embossing, my die cut machine. And this creates this really cool looking embossed image with the watercolor background. I want to layer this on a white card, and I'm using a piece of pink cardstock where I roughed up the edges. And then I'm also inking the border of the piece of the background piece with a light pink, and this is the color Princess from my distress inks, but it's very similar to the Tattered Rose from the Distress inks. Then I'm attaching my background with my tape runner to my card, and I use the sticker and I sticked it on white cardstock and fussy cut it out, and I'm gonna lift this off with some foam tape, and I want this to be my focal point of the card. Then I'm stamping out the Hey Sweetie, and I cut this out, and I also give it a little bit dimension with my ink here, and I again lift this up with some foam tape, and then I'm adding a bunch of those pretty sequins to my background, and I'm starting on the top left and let them run down diagonally to the bottom right. That creates some movement. And then for the final touch, I'm just adding stickles in diamond, and I also use some glaze, crystal glaze, for the top of my cupcake. And here's the finished card. Okay, card number 2. For card number 2, I decided to use a piece of pen and paper that has those flying candies and treats, and I am using a stamp from my stash. It's actually a honeybee stamp set, and this has the big word sweet. I stamped this out in pink and also embossed it in pink. And after heating this, I am using a die, the matching die, and cut this word out. And I want the word to be my focal point of this card. Then I'm adding the second part of the sentiment, which will be "You are so." Comes from the same stamp set, and I am stamping this again in pink. And then I had this idea to create some candies, and I'm using the tissue paper that came with the kit, and I cut small pieces, and then I just created one of the little pieces and created the inside of the candy. I rolled it all up and then wrapped this in another piece and created kind of a hard candy wrapper, turning the edges and just cut it into a candy. I created 3 candies for this card, and I am layering this on a mint colored card on white cardstock, the pattern paper, and then I added the word sweet with foam tape, cut out the other part and attach it right behind this. And then I'm adding my candies with liquid glue. And for more embellishing, I'm adding more sequins. And also some Nuvo drops. And here's the finished card. Okay, card number 3. So for this card, I colored this piece of tissue paper that had the treats on it, and I'm using my mica powders for this. This works very well because it's dry and it doesn't rip the paper or make it wet. And after I colored this, I'm actually using a white piece of cardboard, and then I'm crunching this all up because I want to get this texture that crunching up creates. And I'm just using a glue stick and add this all over the cardstock there. And then I'm carefully attaching the tissue paper to my cardstock and cut away the leftovers. Then I'm fussy cutting out the donuts from one of the pattern papers, and I want to use 3 donuts, and then I'm roughing up the edges as well. And once that is all dry, I'm roughing up the edges. And here are my 3 donuts, and I decided to cut them completely and remove the holes as well, so you can see the background through it. And then I'm attaching this piece to a yellow card. And for this card, I'm using a sentiment that comes from another honeybee stamp set. And this set has the words Do not worry, you got this. So I'm attaching my donuts with foam tape to lift them, and I'm adding the glaze to make them look very dimensional, realistic. And then I'm stamping out my sentiment. And you will see that I created another card like this. Here you go, where I left the tissue paper as is. I didn't add colors. And you see me here adding the glaze, and I attached the sentiment on one side. I literally pressed it into the glaze, and on the other side I used a bit of a foam tape to keep it in place. And then I'm adding more Nuve drops, and I'm using the same colors as the donuts have. And here's the finished card, and you will see the other card in the end of this video. Card 4. You are so nice. For this card I used the pattern paper that has this yellow texture on it, and I am creating 3 sections with those peel-offs that came with the kit. I just attached them horizontally, and then I'm adding it to my card. I chose this time a white one, and then I'm using the washi tape that came with the kit and stick it on excuse me, a white piece of cardboard, a cardstock, and I fussy cut those out. And then I attach them in 3 rows on my card. The top and the bottom one I'm using foam tape to lift them up. And the third one I just layer underneath the first row. Yeah, there you can see me doing that. And then I am using the cookie shape with a sentiment, and I'm add this to my bottom row in a little angle. And then I'm arranging all my fussy cut pieces of treats around the sentiment and on my card. And some of them I just glue flat, and some of them I just lift with some foam tape. And then of course I'm adding some Nuve drops, some stickles, and of course some glaze to let that cookie stand out, make it more dimensional. And I also put some glaze on those little hearts. And that's the finished card. Card 5. For this card I chose a pattern paper, and I used a die from my stash, a frame die, and I also used a piece of vellum, and I'm using all those cookie stamps from the stamp set, and arrange them on that vellum. And I am stamping this with embossing ink. And then I'm gonna emboss this, I'm embossing this with gold embossing powder from Rangers. Then I'm gonna attach my background, and I chose this mint color cardstock for my card. And I'm attaching my vellum. And then I am stamping out all the cookies again with my embossing ink. And this time I am using a peach, and a Lizi's Royal Gold embossing powder. And after I heat set this, I'm fussy cut all those cookies out, and I will arrange them on my background and attach them with foam tape. And I also attach my sentiment, and Miss You comes from a stamp set from Leckereien. Yeah, this is from a Leckereien stamp set, and then the other one was the sentiment from the La Femme Lizi set that came with the kit. And here's the finished card. I added again Nouveau drops and stickles. Card number 6. For this card I chose an embossing folder from my stash. This has like sprinkles, and I fussy cut a bunch of cookies out of 2 pattern papers, and I used a sentiment from the die cut set, and I'm embossed on this matte silver cardstock. And I also used a piece of silver vellum from my stash to layer. So I'm layering this on the vellum and then the silver matte. And I am using some of my pink ink and give this sentiment some dimension, and I also added a white border around the sentiment. I really want this to pop off the card as my focal point. And I'm also rounding the edges. And then I lift this up with foam tape and add this to my card. And then I am arranging all those goodies, treaties, around my sentiments in non-particular order. I'm just finding a nice arrangement. Some of them I glue on flat, and some of them I'm using glue dots. The glue dots just stick better on this silver cardstock. There we go. And of course I'm gonna embellish this with some sequins. and some stickers in diamond color, and of course some of the pink one that came with the kit. And here is my finished card. Card number 7. For this card I decided to create my own watercolor background. I'm just randomly chose some pastel colors, and I don't have something special in mind. I just add the color and let them flow together. I'm using a lot of water here. And I sprinkle water. And then after, I'm using some pearl white shimmer powder and just sprinkle this on there. That gives it this shimmer effect. And after I dry this, I'm adding even more color and more water, and also some splatters in blue and in pink. And even more color. Then I dry this and add this pink ink around the edges. And then I am adding with my stencil, this is a stencil I have on my stash, it's from Leckereien and I think it calls Party Time. And I'm adding this with the glitz glitter gel in white onto my background to give it some texture. And then I cut out, or I die cutted out donuts with the die that came in the kit, and I am fussy cut the toppings separate and glue them on the bottom parts. And then I'm using my Posca white marker and also my Spectrum aqua markers and draw on some sprinkles. And once I'm done with this, I wanted to create a frame for my donuts, and I chose one of my dies, square die, to do this. And then I lift up my donuts with foam tape. And attach them to that die cut piece that I used. I used that silver cardstock for. I stamped out my sentiment in pink and clear embossed that. I will fussy cut this out, and then I chose a very bright pink as my card. And I think that really makes my background pop. I'm adding some dimension to the sentiment. I'm adding my background, and I'm adding my donuts and my sentiment with foam tape. And then for a final touch, I am adding glaze to the donut toppings to really let them look dimensional. Some Nouveau drops, and then in the middle I am using one of the bows that came with the kit and attach it with a glue dot in the middle. And this is the finished card. Card 8. For card number 8, I chose one of the pattern papers that has the pink textured background, and I wanted to create some texture by adding dimensional stripes with my glitter gel. And after this dries, I cut this to size. Then I decided to use another piece of pattern paper, and I ripped this up with my ruler into waves, kind of a wavy border, and I wanted to attach this halfway to my background, and I cut this to size. And then I'm attaching it with foam tape. I'm adding the foam tape between those glitter lines because they are raised. So I'm raising this up the right side, and then I rough up the edges, but only on the side that has the stripes, and attach it to my background. And I chose a white card this time. And then I use one of the tags, and I cut a little, I used a die from my stash and cut it out with like a bloomy border or wavy border. And I also have like a hello die that I used and cut out 3 hellos and stacked them. And then I'm inking or stamping out my sentiment sweetie on yellow cardstock, and we'll clear emboss that as well. I cut this to size, and I also round the borders on 2 sides, opposite sides, adding some ink. And then I am attaching my cupcake, and I used foam tape only on one side since it raised on the right side to make it even, and I glue the other side with liquid glue. I do the same with my hello sentiment. And then I'm attaching my sweetie flat with liquid glue below the hello, and add some glitter to my cupcake cherry there, and some glaze to the cupcake paper, and also some drops to the right side of the card. And this is the finished card. Card number 9. For this card, I decided to use this paper that has the donuts in a row, and I chose a square card, and I fussy cut the same donuts out of the other piece of pattern paper. There were 2 of those in there, and I'm using again the honeybee stamps set that had the Don't Worry sentiment, and this time I'm using the sentiment Be Happy and Eat the Donut. Stamping this in pink and clear emboss that. I do the same with the Eat the Donut in blue this time. And then I'm cutting this to size. And for more texture on this background, I chose a stamp set from Creative Stamps that has watercolor splotches, and I chose 2 different splotches, and I'm gonna ink them with my embossing ink. I just want to give it more random texture. Then I'm going to clear emboss this. And this just gives this random splotchy texture. I'm adding some Nouveau Shimmer droplets. And then I'm attaching my background once it's dry, attaching it to my card. I'm adding my donuts with some foam dots, and I'm adding them on top of the same ones that's on the pattern paper, so it matches. Then I'm cutting up my sentiment. Fussy cut this, adding ink, and I'm also inking up the other one and attach it together. And then add it with foam tape to my card. And here's the finished card. I've lost some of the footage of this card, but I added sequins and Nouveau drops to this one. Card number 10. For card number 10, I used one pattern paper and then the gold mat. I embossed the gold mat, the gold cardstock, and I used the wonky rectangle die from Daisy May Designs. And then I decided to use a background stamp that has like a linen texture, and I stamped this on the blue card. And I actually embossed this with a baby blue embossing powder. And that gives this really cool texture on the card. Then I cut out a piece of gold vellum, and I'm attaching my cookie, that's my focal point for this card, on it. And then I'm using those 2 rectangles and attach them in kind of like angled way on the card, so you can still see some of the texture from the card. And I cut this to size, and I'm adding my cookie with foam tape to the middle. And then I'm stamping out my sentiment, which will be your one smart cookie. And I'm stamping this on yellow cardstock and in black. And then I'm using, I think that's the corduroy, brush corduroy distress ink to ink this up. And I'm adding some glaze, and I'm also adding some of the wooden dots that I had left over from last kit that I colored. I thought they matched perfectly with this card. And for a final touch, I'm adding some Nouveau drops. And here's the finished card. Now I have one bonus card, and for this card I wanted to play around with the Cosmic Shimmer powders. I just used a piece of watercolor paper, I wetted it, and then randomly dropping in the powders. I used a plum, I used a blue, I used a yellow, and a spearmint color, I think. Yeah, like a greenish color. And then I spritz it with water and just let the powders do their work. I'm just lifting the paper here and there. And I'm still adding red because I thought it needed more red. And I'm adding more water. And when this is all like I want it, I just stop and gonna heat dry this. And this shimmer, those powders gives this really nice shimmer. And then I'm adding distress paint in white. And I cut out my donuts with a die, and I'm just really randomly color my donuts. I'm not really paying a lot of attention of detail or anything. I'm just gonna paint them with some color. I just want this to be fun. There we go. And then once I have them all colored, I dried them, and then again with my first I rubbed off the edges, and then I'm adding with my Posca marker. First I add more dimension with my ink, and then with my Posca marker I'm adding some sprinkles. And for my sentiment, I'm using one of the die cuts that came with the kit that says happy birthday. And once I'm done with all the sprinkles, I'm assembling my cards, and I'm lifting up all my donuts with foam tape, and I arrange them from the top down. And then attaching my sentiment. And then for a final touch, I am adding some sequins. And some Nova drops. That's those glitter drops. And then to let that cookie stand out better or give it more dimension, I'm adding the glaze to it. And some stickles on the donuts itself. And this is the finished card. So here are all the cards again. And you will see that I created another card like this, but in a horizontal format, and I used a different sentiment for this one. And I also created a second card of this one, and again I chose a different, I just switched the format, I just went vertical here. There was so much pattern paper in this kit, you could make so many cards with it. Now here is the card that I didn't show the end of. This is the one with the colored background, and then you will have here the one that has just a simple background with the white. And then for the yellow card here, I created another one like this. And this time I chose the different die cut here, which said with love, but I kept the same arrangement. And here's the Miss You card. Well, I hope you like my cards and you feel inspired to get creative and create some beautiful, yummy cards with your kit or with your stuff, whatever you have on hand. And I hope I see you in my next video. I will have the Spellbinders kit of January on my desk now, and we'll work on that. And I hope you join me for my next video. Until then, bye.